Hello, wonderful people. In today's video, I want to talk about AI coding and vibe coding. I'm fundamentally not against using AI. What I'm fundamentally against is you using AI blindly and expecting it to give you all the answers. And there's two problems with that. And while perusing Twitter, X, whatever the heck you want to call it, I found the thing that I actually been struggling with on my own. Lee Robinson says, my biggest worry about coding with AI is beginners actually not learning and atrophy of skills. And to be honest, at the beginning, when all these cool tools came out, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna vibe code. I'm just gonna let the things do all the things. And I actually start noticing the more I relied on those systems, I actually started to forget how to do some of the simple things. And so to his point, this idea of you actually stopping the learning process and atrophy of skills is exactly what I've been kind of going through. And he, in his post, kind of says, here's the things that I'm kind of like struggling with. And when I reshared his post, if I go back here, show what I said, I feel the same. And to fight this, I schedule learning time and no AI coding time. And I think it's something that we actually kind of have to be able to do is to do this detox. But with that being said, learning and using AI, you're actually able to experiment, try different things way faster than you would if you didn't have these AI tools. And as an example, I want to show you this game that I'm building. And here you have the camera zoom. It actually has a lot of interesting features. So I want to show you these features first. And then I want to talk about why vibe coding by itself is just not going to help you, or agentic coding if you don't understand the problem you're trying to solve or the things you want to build. So when I was thinking of this idea, I wanted to have a couple of different systems. The first one is you should be able to move in third person like this using a waypoint system, right? And I did this specifically because I wanted the player not to have the ability to move freely. I wanted to have some sort of commitment to the path that you choose, and your character has to follow commitment because of the path, because I wanted to create some sort of interesting game logic around it. But if you switch to first person, which is something that I implemented here, you're able to move freely like you can in an FPS game. And so I decided and thought about what movement systems I want to do and how to implement it. And then I worked on talking through Claude, helping me to understand how to build these system in 3JS. And believe it or not, first person movement and third person movement slightly different. And I had to learn about that. When vibe coding this project from the beginning, I ran into issues where I would just get and create a bunch of nonsense and things didn't really make sense and it didn't really function like I wanted to. So I realized that the first rule of becoming good or being able to utilize these tools most effectively is literally being able to understand the problems you're trying to solve and how to build those systems, or at least how to think about the systems to describe the things that you want to build in a way that makes sense. So if you are non-technical and you don't understand how these underlying systems work, you're not going to be able to prompt your way to a serious project. I actually did a short where you could check it out on my channel, where I talked about how I use Kiro and I vibe coding this snake game. And I showed like a little small part of the game because the whole game was broken, right? Vibe coding on its own without me understanding the problems that I was trying to solve, how the underlying system works under the hood, like it was a mess, and to fix it was a pain in the butt. And so the idea is when you're vibe coding, the more you understand and the more engineering or critical thinking or system design thinking that you're able to apply, the better you would able to do. The second thing that I wanted to implement in this game is this idea of having a build system. So I wanted to have different blocks that folks could use to build different shapes, right? I'm trying it like this. I also wanted to make sure that you can build on top. So I implemented this idea of being able to kind of like move one level up, one level down. And one thing you would think is like, oh, if AI is so good, like it should just implement this for me. But believe it or not, I had to think about exactly how this works and do a iterative approach of kind of being like, okay, well, how does this work? Right. And so here I have my system, I have different blocks. One funny thing I'm going to say, you know that I love Strappy Headless CMS. That's built for websites and to manage content. I was like, you know what? I'm going to use it to manage my blocks. So here I have different blocks that you see in my system. They're all being saved here in my Strappy instance. So what you see in game, these two options come from my Strappy backend, which I thought pretty interesting. So after creating this build system, I was like, okay, what would be cool if people could create custom prefabs? So for instance, I have this prefab. It's like it's a warehouse. That's what I call it, and it's pretty. It doesn't look like a warehouse, right? It's a thing, and you could place it. If you're asking me how to delete it, I don't think I implemented delete on the prefabs yet. You could delete when building, but you're able to have prefabs, and a prefab is basically something you build, right? And you're able to build much faster now. And a prefab is basically based off the little building blocks that you have here. So for instance, I just made this square, right? What I implemented is a system to be able to go ahead and save it as a prefab. So if I go click on capture, which is the P key, and I'm able to select that region, and now I have this modal that says, hey, this is a prefab. I'm going to say, call this a square, even though it's not an even square. And I'm going to call it prefab. Why not? And then I'm going to click save. And so now notice this prefab appears here, and I'm able to use it to build faster by these prefabs. So it's like a system I had to think about. And then you're probably wondering, so what? And then, by the way, I could change view and go into first person perspective. I just realized that I literally clipped into one of the items that I built. So let me refresh and show you again. So go into third person build. Let's do that square prefab. Let's build something interesting using this little building. And I know I'm kind of like playing my own game. I'm kind of finding it like kind of fun to experiment stuff. And so the point is, all these mechanisms, I'm telling you right now, I challenge you, if you're not a developer and you can't kind of think through how to think about what you're building, go ahead and try. You're going to see that it's actually AI is just not enough, because you're going to get to a point where you're going to get stuck. So look at this. This is amazing. You're able to walk around. And so the reason why I was able to kind of get so much done is the way that I think about building stuff. So I showed you the game. I showed you some of the basic systems. I showed you that I'm able to store even my prefabs. Like for instance, the square prefab, I stored it here in Strappy. And so you kind of have to have a vague idea or a pretty good idea of what you're trying to accomplish. So the part that I want to say here, and let's jump into the code, is that when vibe coding, here's the things, or using AI to help you code, the most important thing you have to do is you actually, one, have to have a clear idea of what you're trying to build and have some sort of idea of how the systems that thing is built on function. If you don't know how they function, you should have the kind of know-how or the ability to do some research or minor Googling, whatever it is, and ask the right questions to tease out the correct answers of what you're trying to build. So if we take a look at this code, it's a small project, but you see that we have our core for our core kind of features of the app, including our event bus, our input manager, our state manager. Then we have our entities, which is our character, and the character has different abilities and different methods that we have on it to allow movement and allow different functionality. We have our grid, which is basically a function that sets up our world grid. And if I go to third person and zoom out, I did add the kind of like the fog of war. But if you keep scrolling, this map will infinitely move and continue to get larger. And why? Because I wanted to build a game where you're able to explore. And it's similar to Minecraft, I wanted it to generate those chunks dynamically. So what I had to do, I had to learn about chunks and how are they handled and how would you generate them. And so the idea is, while prompting with AI through this, I actually went and researched and tried to kind of understand how the things work. And so the biggest disservice that I could do here is look at this code and not kind of be able to understand what it's doing and how it works. And if you don't understand the code that the AI has given you, one, you won't be able to extend it or fix it when weird bugs come up. I had this weird bug where my placement system would constantly be offset and didn't work. And I had to try different approaches and iterations while learning to them. So the first thing I do when I started the project and using AI to help me explore this new thing. I've never coded with Three.js. This is like my first time. Is kind of trying to do things in a way where at the end of the day, after this project is done, for instance, you could see I have something that kind of works. You could move around, you could do all these things, you could switch views, go to different first person, and you could build, you could save. Like once you have something that works, the way I got here is not by one shot prompting where I said like, "Hey, build this thing," and oh my god, it went ahead and built it. There was a thought process that went ahead. I realized like early on, like I need to kind of have some sort of debugging. So I created this debugging screen that will kind of log all the different events that are happening and stuff like that. And build. And yeah, and then even now I just realized like when I go to move, I should exit the build mode. And so that's something I'm gonna fix, not on this video, but the point is, see, like I have the thing, but I should not have it when I'm moving like this. So the idea is that you kind of have to think through the things that you're trying to do, and you think of these systems. How can you build a project that's going to be maintainable? And so I realized that I would need to have different events in game that I could log and check and to kind of basically understand how things work. And if as a developer you didn't think about that, like as a vibe coder that doesn't have some sort of development skill, like you would just never thought of that. And so when I started building this game, I would build it in really small chunks and really small systems. Like let's just create the ground. Can I create this grid? And then, okay, if I were to create a grid, can I put a character on it that moves? And after every step of the way, what I would do is I would basically in Claude, based on the changes I made, I would say, hey, go ahead and create, like you'll see that I have a docs folder here, an architecture document, which covers all the systems that we're building and implementing. So I could have some sort of way to track and think about what I'm doing. And one of the tips I learned from Web Dev Cody, he said, whenever you're asking Claude to summarize something for you, ask it to go ahead and use mermaid diagrams to help you explain what you're doing. Like for instance, here, this is mermaid.js, and this basically is a diagram of the game system, how it works. And then what I do is I save all of this as notes. So every time I would make a small commit, I would regenerate this architecture diagram so I could keep track of what I'm doing, what I'm building. So at any step of the way, I kind of know where I am and how I got there. And what I did is I went ahead and on my personal website, on the blogs, I go ahead and publish all those. So if you take a look at Three.js, you're going to see some of the notes that I took. And so here's the architecture diagram. The latest change was 4 days ago. So when you take a look, you're going to see that it's a pretty comprehensive guide of all the systems that implemented. And when I was implementing things like this list would update and I would ask Claude to update it. So I have a self-documenting kind of architecture of the thing I'm building. And so if I'm looking through this and I don't understand like how something works, I could pause, I could take my time, and I could explore it outside of this code example. And one thing I would say, like when building this right now, I'm exploring, trying to learn things really quickly. One thing I would say, based on this, for instance, we have our event bus. And the event bus provides publish subscribe pattern for decoupling communication between our systems. I'm like, I don't know what the hell it means. And you continue trying to push forward through vibe coding, stop. Try to take and figure out, do your research and learn about like event bus. How can you implement it in the most simplest way? And start with a small like block. The idea is that the more longer you vibe code without understanding what you're doing, the harder it is going to be able to conceptualize what you're doing. So when you're building things, make sure that you're constantly creating self-documenting docs using AI, of course, to help you be able to come back to your project and make sense of it. Here, this is where we implemented the chunk manager for the world. So the idea, the game creates infinite expanding world using chunks. So as you move to the edge at certain points, it's going to trigger a new chunk to be generated. So in theory, the more you explore, the bigger the game map gets and probably will somehow impact performance. And that's probably when you see people on Minecraft, the farther away they go from where they started, the world becomes crazy because I think their game starts literally running out of memory. And here we kind of showcases the configuration for the chunks, the usage of the system, and how it works. And I have these helpful diagrams generated by just prompting Claude, hey, I literally what I do, I say, based on the changes I've made, can you create a comprehensive documentation using Mermaid.js and code snippets where appropriate, documenting the progress I made. And that way you have this self-updating document that you could use as a study guide. So the whole point that I'm trying to say, I'm probably saying it in the longest way possible, and you're probably not going to make it this far in the video, but don't use AI as something that does your job for you, but use it to improve your learning and understanding of things you want to do. So for me, the thing that I really, really want to focus on is how can I become the best developer that I can without AI, but at the same time, learn how to move fast with these AI tools and use the best of both worlds. And I'll show you one more example before I finish this video because I don't want to make it too long because it probably already is not interesting for a lot of you. But whenever you get into some sort of weird thing, like I was working on the block placement system. So in my game, you have this grid builder and you're able to use different blocks to build different shapes. And so I realized that I'm not sharing my screen. Let me go back here. And so I had weird issues where if I start building things and now things work as expected, but notice how my outline for this ghost block, as I call it, it doesn't match up with my cursor. So before I implemented this ghost block, whenever I tried to click on stuff, sometimes like there would be a weird offset where I couldn't understand what is happening. So I had to think about it. I had to kind of figure out like, what am I doing? Why is it not aligned? And it has to do with like how we're identifying where in the grid to place things and how that works with the camera and how we're deciding from which point to do the calculations to figure out where the next block is placed. For instance, how does it know that I want to build on the second row and how to keep everything in the third row, how to keep everything in line? And so for this, honestly, I had no idea. And then having it kind of vibe coding this and trying to figure out like why it's failing while it's not failing. I think I could delete here. And you could see here, like the one issue that I have, like the mouse, like cursor, right? See the mouse cursor of the mouse. It doesn't align with the ghost block, which is something that I do want to resolve. But there's a reason of how we're getting the position and how this works based on perspective. Like for instance, if I like, and so that was like a pain in the butt. And basically what I realized, there's certain math that was happening under the hood. I really didn't understand how it works. So outside of just asking Claude to document stuff, I literally was like, hey, based on what we're working on, where's the math that I have to do? And then I would ask Claude, create a document that describes all the math that we're using and what I have to understand the math. And so it went ahead and created this markdown document. And what I love about this stuff is that now, and the reason why I use markdown, AI love markdown, by the way. If you going to ingest data with AI, just put it as a markdown. I'm just going to give you that quick tip. But I write everything as markdown on my blog post. And because Claude loves to write everything in the blog post, I'm like, great. Like I'm going to create this as a note in my website. So now if I'm confused or I need a refresher, I don't understand something in my code base, I'm going to go ahead back and I'm going to take a look. Oh, game math for my grid builder game. and I'm going to go ahead and open it, and I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to kind of see these examples. And so here's like some of the problems they had when you use user clicks on the screen. We need to figure out which grid cells they're clicking on in 3D space. And then it kind of talks about this concept of raycasting and the ground plane intersection and how it decides. And so like I needed to understand the math of, and I suck at math, but thank God for AI. It's helping me to kind of figure things out, how to calculate that point. And now I have a document that I could come back to and study to understand how things work. And so the point is, yes, you could vibe code, but if you don't understand what you're vibe coding, especially when you start working on a complex system, and that's why I say vibe code a game, see what you're going to make, and vibe code a game of the thing that you actually want. Like you could say, create bliss, blah, 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 and then it does it. But if you tell it specifically what to create, you're going to see that you're going to have some problems because you have to think through the stuff. And so the last final thing that I'm going to say is, even though I'm using AI to vibe code this project, even though I'm asking AI to help me self-document the things that I'm doing so I could use as study guides, I am still investing in my education and into learning things that I want. And so I follow this creator, Simon Dev. I think in terms of learning about video game stuff, he's explains it really good. And so I literally got all his courses. I have his game dev shader math bundle. So if I go to the course, I have a couple of different courses. And so we have the game dev course, but I also took his math course. And the reason is because even though AI could help me with stuff, I want to actually learn the underlying math, the underlying tools that help me understand what I need to know. So in this course, he talks about, basic setup, but then talks about distance, vectors addition, associative and cumulatively, intro to 2D vectors, all this stuff that's complex. And so if you're building a game, you're building something complex, and it could be in web dev, whatever it is, if you don't understand the underlying system and how things work, you could never self-check or guide the AI tooling successfully. So this video is definitely too long. By the way, if you made it this far, God bless you, high 10. I don't know if I would make it that far, but I want to make this video because I want to document kind of like my experience with building things with the AI, kind of what I'm learning, what I'm doing, and hopefully you get some tips. But for those of you who are questioning, will AI replace developers? I don't think so. I think AI is going to make us, let me rephrase that. AI is going to make good developers be even better, and terrible developers are still going to be terrible unless they're using AI in some ways that I showed today, where you're using it to kind of speed up your learning purpose and your journey. If you like this video, hit the smash button. If you hated it, you could, of course, say whatever you want in the comments. The more people talk in the comments, the more engagement my video gets. So even if it's like, I hate you, your nose is huge, whatever, it's fine. But I would prefer like some constructive feedback and things that you're doing in your life and your experience. So with that being said, thanks so much. I will see you in the next one.